thank you, as always, for joining me for this wonderful Thursday evening. I am so enjoying meeting you all again in Conversations with a Bodhisattva. It's such fun. And every week, as you know, we've been exploring this, at the moment, some aspect to our how we're relating and what we are putting into the space between us all. So obviously in relationship, the most important thing is the space within us, that if we have that awareness, that space, that openness, that awareness, then what's going to happen is, of course, we're going to be much more conscious all the time of what we're putting into the space between us and the other. So this talking about these things is obviously about all relationships, every single relationship, every single encounter we have, because if we are able to be present, absolutely here now, in this present moment, in our essence, the space within us, the place where there isn't anything clouded by our conditioning, our history, our adaptations, our beliefs, our opinions, if we're able to sink, I suppose sink's the word, into that energy and be absolutely still, then ultimately every single relationship would be a dance of fun, because we would be properly aware of ourselves. If there was anything that came up that was we felt the energy change within us, we would know that we weren't actually present with the person in front of us, and that we could be immediately either projecting something onto them from our past, from our beliefs, from our opinions. We could be hearing something they hadn't said because it has touched in us something deep from the past. And so always there is the potential for the space between us to get contaminated because of those things. However, as you know, that I'm always encouraging you to really, really be mindful in every moment, to come back to the present moment, come back to presence itself, into that awareness, so that you're aware all the time of what you're putting in the space between the other. And then, even if the person in front of you is putting into the space something that is off, that is coming from their own agenda, their own history, their own opinions, their own wounding, any of those things, there's not going to be the same muddle that can happen when two people have that happening. So many relationships are not taking place in the present moment at all. They're taking place with both people acting out, can be up to 90% unconsciously, coming ultimately from a whole heap of historical patterns, programs, beliefs, ideas, and therefore two people meet and think they're having a conversation with each other, but actually they're quite likely having a conversation with people in their history, the person that bullied them at school, the mother, the father, all the different characters. And ultimately it's why there's drama in life. There's loads of psychological dramas going on within people, where they're caught in their own reactivity, their own narrative that creates their own psychological drama that then they go and project onto others. So there's a whole big muddle. Whereas if we come back to the simplest place of presence, of basically at the simplest level, taking that deep breath, coming back into the body, coming back into the center point, big deep breath, breathe out all the tension, and that space at the bottom of the breath is the space where that truth of us all is, the place of wholeness, oneness, where we're all reflecting each other. If we all did that, then obviously we could all heal, simply interaction by interaction. Now, obviously that isn't going on. However, we can be mindful of it. And today I've put as the heading, the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse in relating. And this research was done by someone who's known as a marriage guru, and he's a great psychologist, and his name's John Gottman. Now obviously I do work with couples, I work with a lot of couples, but essentially I work in relationship with with people, with the relationship they have with themselves, number one, because that's the starting point of it all, clearing away all of our own limiting beliefs, limiting behaviours, wounding adaptations that are coming from that wounding. When I say wounding, the wounds that have come where when we were little we didn't feel heard, or we felt abandoned, or we felt mistreated, all those things that we carry on through life, because then what can happen is the filter we're looking through means that can happen again and again, and we get layers and layers and layers. So the starting point always is our relationship with ourselves, but obviously then it's being mindful of what we put in the space between us and the other. And the four horsemen of the apocalypse, the four behaviours that are so destructive in relationship, and if they happen a lot, John Gottman did a lot of research, and he did it with couples. As I said, my work's with everybody, I'm sure his is actually, but he's particularly known as a marriage guru. But I will do it with anything to do in the workplace, to do out in the world, to do in our clubs, our families, everything. It's looking at how we're relating and the part we're playing in that relationship, because ultimately that's the only bit that we can change. We can obviously request somebody else has a behaviour change, but ultimately it is looking at us, and that's what I'm doing here tonight particularly. So these four behaviours that he did a lot of research on, and he actually had couples staying for weeks and weeks, and he had them being filmed so that he watched them and they just relaxed and just lived their relationships. And he noticed that he began to be able to predict whether people would divorce or not, because of the frequency with which these behaviours were in their relationship. And if they were in their relationship a lot, he could predict divorce, and was generally accurate. So these four behaviours, or four energies, are criticism, defensiveness, stonewalling, and contempt. And unfortunately, probably a high percentage of any relating has probably all of those in, and probably there are people who do one more than the other, but generally criticism and defensiveness often go together, because in criticism nobody likes being criticised. Generally most people are quite vulnerable, quite sensitive. Most people have still got their wounded child in them. They may not know it. Lots of people don't know it. What I see a grown up as is someone who's grown up, but they haven't necessarily investigated any of their the ways they behave. They haven't investigated their inner child, the wounded child, and so therefore that the inner child, the wounded child, can appear at any point. And also it's very vulnerable, and it's much more vulnerable to criticism. I would describe an adult as somebody who has really had some awareness of their own wounding, their own reactivity, their own places of vulnerability where they are going to react, feel upset, feel angry, feel all of those things, and be able to work with them. And then an adult is somebody who has healed their wounded child generally. Well, completely, not generally. So criticism, generally if somebody criticises another, they have a need within them. Criticism in adults is often like a baby's cry, that it's crying out for a need. And there are, in coupledom, there's often familiar ones around, you never empty the dishwasher, or you always eat the last egg. So I'm just remembering a client from the past, actually. That's just something that came to me in the fridge. Always at the last egg. So those always and never can be, and they aren't just in couples, as I say. I'm not talking just about couples here. All of my work's about us in all of our relationships, and the intimacies, which don't have to be partners and couples. Intimacies are our friends and our colleagues and our family, and the closer the relating, the closer the intimacy, the more likely the magnifying glass for our stuff. So criticism is very, very destructive, actually. And ideally, we don't ever criticize. Ideally, that would be the absolute. If we're talking about ourselves, I'm not talking about other people criticizing us, because that's another whole separate thing where I would be working with you individually to be able to heal the part of you that would react with hurt, because we'd be investigating the wound, because the ultimate is that we wouldn't get touched. But anyway, we're now talking about what we put in the space. So ideally, we never criticize somebody, ever, 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 because it's very damaging to the space. It's very, very damaging to the space. And if we think the space between us, the space within us, there's more space than there is, people. And so everything we're doing, we are putting that into the energy, and we are making a difference. As I said last week, or I think it was Monday with the chanting, our energy fields spread out, far, far out from us. They've now got loads, now that all of spirituality's met science. Quantum physics has done so much research, and they say that our energy fields stretch out up to 15 feet outside us. So we are impacting on people every single moment of the day. So what we're putting into the space, so even thinking critical thoughts is an energy. Now, that doesn't mean we won't have observations. There's a fine line between criticism and observation. So we might observe something, we might observe the behaviour of someone, we might observe all manner of things. It might be something that we would observe is damaging to people, isn't helpful, all manner of things. But there's such a fine line between judgment and observation. Observation gives us wisdom, discernment. We can make decisions about who we spend time with, what actions we take. Whereas judgment is toxic, really, and it's going to be coming from something within us. So really and truly eliminate criticism from your being. As I say, that doesn't mean that you wouldn't, in relating with somebody, stay in an abusive situation. It doesn't mean that you wouldn't ask somebody for a behaviour change. It doesn't mean there wouldn't be intentional dialogue to work something out. But it does mean that you would seek in yourself what your need is, seek inside what's going on for you. Because if there's a reaction in the body and a feeling that you need to hit out with a criticism, then ultimately there's something going on within you that needs investigating. As I say, that's completely different to being in a situation that isn't right, that where you need to make changes. If you've got an employee who's not performing well, then of course you need to talk it through, and of course you need to address those things. But there's a different way of doing it than criticising the person directly. It's the energy with which it's given. So of course we need to give boundaries to children. We need to let people clear direction, as Jane always knows. I'm very clear direction. I'm very bossy, but she says it's clear direction. So it's really recognising that what I'm talking about is more about the energy within us. It's more what we're feeling. Are we judging? Are we criticising? Is it coming from something in us that is hurt, wounded, shrinking back, upset? Because criticism often can come out of our own pain. So that's to investigate. In couples, if you are in a couple situation, or you're in a work colleague situation, or friends, and you are working with this kind of thing together, I've often worked with couples and suggested they literally just stop the criticism and actually make it homework. Go back and see if you can say things in a different way, use a different tone of voice, because criticism often comes out with tone, comes out with, the you always, you never. It comes out with a kind of criticism on the person. So criticism, stop it. And then of course defensiveness comes from criticism, because often if somebody criticises, someone defends. And of course, again, if somebody is defending, then immediately the whole space isn't going to be very constructive. It just becomes a kind of war and a battleground. Whereas if one person, say it's with two people, if somebody has criticised and the other person then needs to dodge it so it doesn't land, because And that's where intentional dialogue can help. And by that, I mean, just repeat back what you've heard. Give yourself time. If you're feeling reactive, somebody's chucked criticism at you, just breathe deeply, repeat back what's been said. Oh, so you think that, whatever it might be. And all of this, I know, is not easy in the absolute heat of the moment, but it's worth really investigating. And if you are in situations with a partner, or you're a child, or your mother, or close people you're living with, or you're in an office with people, I think it's worth discussing all this stuff and saying, look, let's try and do this. Let's make the space between us all really harmonious and positive, and we can change the language, because how we say something is integral to what we say. So we can say exactly the same thing with a different energy, with different, being creative. Our words and our thoughts make such a difference. They are energy in themselves. They have an energy of their own, and we are affecting the person in front of us, the energy around us, by everything we think, everything we say. I always say, imagine all your thoughts are being heard, because they are on a level. We all can tune into everybody's thoughts, and we can see it in people's faces and all that. So those are those two. I'm aware I'm meant to be doing a 20-minute video, so I could talk about these obviously at great length. The stonewalling is when somebody says something to somebody and they just ignore them and push back. Again, it's sort of like defensiveness, the pushback. And what can happen with somebody stonewalling is the other person gets reactive and critical, and the whole thing again spirals. So if you're somebody who stonewalls, and it's important to seek inside what's going on for you. Are you feeling threatened? Is it a pattern from did you have a mother that went on and on and on and on and on, and that's the only thing you could do, or a father that shouted at you? There's all these things that based in our childhood, those formative years. Those first 7 years are massively formative, and they used to think that the neuroplasticity, the neuroscientists used to think that the neuroplasticity in the brain, those first 7 years are massively important. The first 2 or 3 years is huge. We're learning to walk and talk, and children can learn multiple languages at that time. I mean, there's masses going on. Then the 7 to 14, they used to think that was that. At 14 years old, you were set for life, and that nothing could change. And old-fashioned psychotherapy only went into seeing why we behaved as we did. They didn't think you could change it, but we can. They've then since proven that the pathways in the brain can be rerouted, but it comes through really being mindful of what you think and what you say repeatedly. So being really aware is so key, and therefore it's useful to reflect. If you stonewall and you push back, where's that come from? And of course, with any of these adaptations, stretch out of it. So if you feel the feeling, a lot of it's feeling it in the body, feel the feeling of kind of pushing away, not wanting to say anything, turning away, just exiting from the space. Really stretch out of that. It's not easy, but it can be done. Even if you have to go and take a deep breath and give yourself a little talking to, it can be done. And I've seen it. I've seen miracles. I'm so fortunate. I've worked with people, been in front of people for 45 years, I think. It's forever. Since I was 18 till now, 65, long time. And I've seen miracles. I've seen people stretch out of their adaptations, and the space transforms, the relationships transforms, but more importantly, the person transforms. You transform by changing these behaviours, because they are going to be rooted. If you're feeling critical of somebody, if you're feeling defensive, if you are pushing back and stonewalling somebody, there's an arrow pointing to something within you that needs addressing. So always remember that. As I say, these are very quick videos, so I can't go as much into detail as I would were it a longer seminar, retreat, all the things that are coming. And finally, contempt. Now, I should imagine I've definitely seen this a lot out in the world. You could be in a restaurant and see it, where one, there's a family group and things are going on, and one person just, raises their eyebrows about another, like that. I've had people do it to me about their person at the table, and I don't join in, But or people do it in a queue, or people do it about the person is taking a long time at the serving people at the bar or something. That is, it's not kind, and it's also going to be something to do with you, because if we're raising our eyes and going about somebody, I'm just about to smile because I sometimes do it to Nadi's jokes. He does. Nadi's my husband, for anybody who has never seen me before, and he tells jokes that I sometimes do that too, but I am actually doing it with great love. Although, to be honest with you, it's a good idea to never do it. So it's important to recognise what the energy of which we do things. Now you see, I can make up the rules for myself. But the energy with which we do things, and actually that is true, it is the energy with which we do things. Because something I'll often suggest to my clients is they can say the same things with humour. So if they do want a behaviour change, if they do notice that somebody's, chucking criticism at them, if they do know that the other person's stonewalled, or they, feel that they want to, humour's a great way of communicating, just to say, oh, I'm lucky I dodged that, when someone's chucked a criticism at you, and you can say it. But again, it's with the energy. If it's passive aggressive, that's no good. If it's still coming from, the pain, and only you will know that. So with all this work, it's self-reflection is the key, because we need to be aware, if I go back to the beginning, of really and truly working every single day to be absolutely present all the time, ideally. That, bringing the mind back to the centre point, bringing it back to I am where I am. It's okay. Trying not to be ruminating about the past, thinking too much about the future. Use the mind as the tool it's meant to be used as. Turn it on when you need it and it's brilliant. Switch it off. And then if you're in the present, you are going to be more mindful of what's going on. You'll notice if you feel that you're about to criticise someone, if you're feeling defensive, if you're feeling that you want to exit the conversation and just shut down, if you're feeling, about somebody. And it's for you to reflect, what's going on for me. Always press pause, always recognise that there's all the time in the world. We change our lives by when something happens, and we'll feel a response, a reaction, or whatever coming up to something that's going on in the outer realms with another person. We have all the time in the world, and we can completely change our lives by the different response we give. And it is our responsibility, and we can absolutely, as I said, we can heal the space between us all, make it whole, make it vibrant, alive, energized, in our every single thought, our every word and interaction by interaction. So I hope that wasn't too much of a whistle stop. Just keep an eye on the time, and I try to keep it to about 20 minutes. So thank you.